I created this account because there's no chance I'd ever tell this story under my real name. I've carried this secret for almost 15 years. I've never told my wife. I've never told my parents. I've never even admitted it to myself out loud. Maybe writing it here is selfish. Maybe I'm hoping someone tells me I imagined everything, but I know exactly what I saw. I grew up in a small town surrounded by endless forest. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone respected one rule: never stay in the woods after dark. Adults laughed whenever kids asked why. They'd simply say, "You'll understand someday." I thought they were trying to scare us. When I turned 16, my friends dared me to spend one night camping deeper into the forest than anyone usually went. There were 4 of us: Ryan, Luke, Ethan, and me. We packed snacks, cheap flashlights, sleeping bags, and enough confidence to believe nothing bad could happen. Around midnight, we heard the first whistle. It wasn't a bird, it wasn't the wind. It sounded like someone calling another person from very far away. Luke whistled back. 5 seconds later, the exact same whistle answered, but much closer. Ryan laughed. "Someone's messing with us." Then Ethan whispered, "Guys, who else would even be out here?" Silence. Complete silence. Not a single insect. Not one owl. Nothing. That's when our flashlight beams landed on something between the trees. A person, standing perfectly still, far enough away that we couldn't make out a face. Just a silhouette, watching us. Luke shouted, "Hey!" The figure didn't move. Didn't answer. Didn't react. Ryan took 2 steps toward it. The figure stepped behind a tree. Gone. We searched. Nothing. No footprints. No broken branches. Nothing. We decided to pack up immediately. As we walked back toward the trail, I realized something. There weren't 4 sets of footsteps. There were 5. Someone had been walking behind us the entire time. None of us mentioned it, but I know we all noticed, because nobody spoke for the next 2 miles. We reached the parking lot around 3 in the morning. Ryan looked back toward the trees, then quietly said, "I don't think it wanted us to leave." The next morning, Ryan disappeared. His truck was still parked outside his house. His phone stayed on his desk. Police searched those woods for weeks. Nothing. No body, no clues, no evidence. Just gone. We all agreed never to talk about that night again. Until today. Because last week, I drove past those woods, and standing beside the old trail was someone wearing Ryan's exact camping jacket, looking directly at my car. I didn't stop. I didn't even breathe until I reached the highway. Maybe grief changes people. Maybe guilt invents memories. Or maybe, whatever watched us that night never actually left those woods. I never expected cleaning out my grandmother's house to change the way I looked at my entire family. After she passed away, my parents asked me to help empty the old farmhouse before it was sold. It had been in our family for more than 70 years. Every room was packed with dusty furniture, photo albums, antique clocks, and boxes that hadn't been opened in decades. Everyone else worked downstairs. I volunteered to clear the attic. The attic was cramped, hot, and smelled of old wood and mildew. The only light came through a tiny round window at the far end. Most of the boxes contained exactly what you'd expect: Christmas decorations, old clothes, and faded family photographs. Then I noticed something strange. Behind an old wardrobe was a narrow wooden panel that looked newer than everything else around it. When I pulled it aside, I found a small hidden compartment. Inside was a metal box wrapped in a faded blanket. It wasn't locked, just tied shut with an old leather strap. Inside were dozens of yellowed letters, black and white photographs, a silver pocket watch, and a leather journal. The first page stopped me cold. It wasn't my grandmother's handwriting. It belonged to someone named Eleanor, dated 1968. The first sentence read, "If anyone finds this, it means I never had the courage to tell the truth." I figured it was some old family diary, so I kept reading. At first it sounded ordinary: daily life, chores around the farm, family dinners. But a few pages later, the tone changed. Eleanor wrote that someone had started coming to the house late at night. Not a stranger, someone the family already knew. She never wrote his name, only referred to him as him. She claimed everyone pretended nothing was happening. Every time she tried to tell someone, they would say she was imagining things. Then I reached a page with water stains, as if someone had cried while writing it. "If I disappear, don't believe what they tell you." I felt a chill run through me. I checked the family tree hanging downstairs. There was no Eleanor. Not anywhere. When I asked my mother who Eleanor was, she froze for a second, before saying, "I've never heard that name." The answer came too quickly. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I searched old newspaper archives online using the date from the journal. After nearly an hour, I found a tiny article from 1969. A young woman named Eleanor Matthews had disappeared from a town less than 20 miles away. The article said she'd last been seen near our family's property. No suspects, no witnesses, no body. I stared at the screen for several minutes. The photograph beside the article looked familiar. I ran downstairs and grabbed one of the old family albums. There she was, standing in the background of one of our family reunion pictures, smiling. She was wearing the exact same dress as in the newspaper photograph. Why wasn't she listed anywhere in our family records? The next day, I confronted my uncle. The moment I mentioned Eleanor's name, the color drained from his face. He didn't ask how I knew. He simply whispered, "Put everything back where you found it." Then he walked away. That answer only made me more suspicious. Over the next week, I scanned every letter and every page of the journal. Most of it described arguments inside the house. Family members whispering behind closed doors. Doors locked from the outside. People pretending certain conversations had never happened. Then I found the final entry. It was only one sentence. "They're taking me to the old well tonight." There were no more pages. I remembered something. When I was a kid, there had been an old stone well behind the barn. It had been filled with concrete years ago. Nobody ever explained why. The next morning, before anyone else arrived, I walked out there. The concrete covering the well had cracked with age. Near one edge, I noticed something sticking out. It looked like metal. I brushed away years of dirt. It was a silver pocket watch, the exact one from the hidden box upstairs. I stood there for a long time, trying to convince myself it was just a coincidence. Then I heard footsteps behind me. It was my father. He looked at the watch in my hand, then quietly said, "You should leave that alone." I asked him who Eleanor really was. He didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward the old well and said something I'll never forget. "Some secrets don't disappear. They just wait." We sold the farmhouse 2 months later. The hidden compartment was empty when the new owners moved in. The journal, the letters, the photographs, everything had vanished. No one in my family has ever mentioned Eleanor again. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the entire thing. Then I remember the newspaper article and the photograph. Because those were real. At least, I think they were. The strange part? A week after I posted this story online, I received an anonymous message. It contained only 6 words. "Stop digging before history repeats itself." I never believed people who said they were being watched. I always assumed there was a logical explanation. Stress, lack of sleep, anxiety. That's exactly what I told myself, until I reviewed my security footage. It started after I moved into a small rental house just outside the city. The neighborhood was quiet, and nothing about the place seemed unusual. The landlord even joked that the loudest thing I'd hear at night would be crickets. For the first few weeks, everything was normal. Then little things began happening. I'd leave my TV remote on the coffee table and find it on the kitchen counter. A cabinet I knew I'd closed would be hanging open when I got home from work. Once, I found my bedroom window unlocked even though I clearly remembered locking it before leaving. I blamed myself. Maybe I was distracted. Maybe I was just forgetful. But the strange incidents became harder to explain. One morning, every chair in my dining room had been pushed away from the table. Perfectly evenly. Almost as if someone had lined them up. I lived alone. There was no one else with a key. At least, that's what I believed. My friends laughed it off. "You're binge-watching too many horror videos." Even my landlord insisted the house was secure. Still, something didn't feel right. So I bought 3 security cameras. One covered the front door. One faced the back entrance. The third pointed down the hallway toward my bedroom. For the first 3 nights, nothing happened. I almost returned the cameras. Then, on the 4th night, I woke up at exactly 3:17 a.m. No noise. No nightmare. Just awake. I checked the hallway. Everything looked normal. The next morning, before work, I opened the camera app out of curiosity. The footage showed me walking to bed around 11:30 p.m. Nothing unusual. Midnight. 1 a.m., 2 a.m., still nothing. Then, at 3:16 a.m., the hallway camera detected movement. I expected to see myself walking to the bathroom. Instead, a figure slowly stepped into the frame. It wasn't me. The person was completely dressed in dark clothing. their face hidden beneath a hood. They didn't rush. They didn't search the house. They simply stood in the hallway, looking directly at my bedroom door. They remained there for almost 2 minutes without moving. Then they quietly walked out of the frame. I checked the front door camera. No one entered. I checked the back door camera. No one left. It made no sense. I watched the footage over and over. There had to be something I missed. That evening, I called the police. 2 officers searched the house from top to bottom. Doors, windows, closets, attic. Nothing. One officer even smiled and said, maybe the camera glitched. I wanted to believe him. Until the next night. This time, I stayed awake. Every light in the house was on. Around 2:45 a.m., I heard a faint scraping sound. Not from outside, from above me, the attic. I grabbed my phone and slowly climbed the pull-down ladder. The attic was empty, except for insulation, old beams, and a few cardboard boxes left by previous tenants. Then my flashlight landed on something unusual, a narrow wooden panel between 2 support beams. It wasn't nailed down. I pulled it open. Behind it was a crawl space just large enough for a person. Inside were empty water bottles, food wrappers, a blanket, and a flashlight. Someone had been living inside the walls of my house, watching me. The police returned immediately. They searched every inch of the crawl space. Whoever had been there was gone. The only thing left behind was a small notebook. Most of the pages were blank, except the last one. Written in black ink were 4 words. You finally looked up. I moved out the very next day. The landlord claimed he had no idea the crawl space even existed. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe he wasn't. A month later, I drove past the neighborhood with a friend. The house was occupied again. A moving truck sat in the driveway. A young couple was unloading boxes, smiling as they carried furniture inside. I almost stopped to warn them. I even rolled down my window. But what was I supposed to say? Be careful. Someone might be living in your walls. They would have thought I was crazy, so I drove away. I haven't gone back since. Sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I still think about that notebook, about those 4 words. And I can't shake one terrifying question. If someone was hiding in my house for weeks, how many nights did they stand outside my bedroom while I was asleep, before I ever checked the cameras?